We are back with you live once again for another Johnny Torch live broadcast, number 158 today. And as usual is the case, we have the only way to spend your Saturday here with us on Johnny Torch Live. Of course, this is not a usually scheduled Torch News Roundup. This is going to be our ranking video that I've been promising for the show we used to do called This Week in Comic Book Television. Unfortunately, it didn't really garner a whole lot of views. So now I give my thoughts on the season of television when all the seasons are over. Now, we're going to rank the 9 series that I followed this season, this television season, and we're going to rank them from the least to the greatest. We are going to try to do a Torch News roundup sometime next week, but a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, and I wanted to get this one banged out especially. This is a little bit easier to do. I didn't do a whole lot of research on this. It's been, quite a while since some of these shows have ended, so I'm going to be going by memory and trying to just recall off the top of my head what I liked and disliked about each series. Uh, I also want to point out that due to the position of time, we have summer shows on now that are not going to be included because I haven't watched the whole series, and rather than have this drag out uh, indefinitely until all of these shows have been watched and critiqued, we are not going to do them in this 2018-2019 season recap. For example, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is back. I saw the first few episodes of that. Looks very good. Krypton just started for season 2. That won't be included. I believe. I think Legion starts at the end of this month sometime. So again, that won't be part of this. If you are looking for those shows after the fact and saying, why didn't you put those in? Well, we can't really fit them in, and leaving this video until the end of summer when most of these shows will be over, it's just not feasible. I didn't review last season's Cloak and Dagger for that reason, and it was pretty bad. Let's put it that way. But we'll see where it lands for season 2 on this countdown on this list. Okay, so let us begin now. We've got, let's see, 9 shows, 9 series that we are going to count down. Starting in 9th place with the Walk of Shame, and it's a real shame too because I really liked this show for the most part, but I felt they had undoubtedly the weakest season. Legends of Tomorrow. Legends of Tomorrow, unfortunately, getting the last place. All right, so let's recall some of this season and try to pinpoint exactly where it kind of went wrong. Let's see. John Constantine, of course. I guess we'll talk with one of the high points of the show, which is Constantine coming back as a full-time member, pretty much of the show. Everybody loves Matt Ryan as Constantine, and he had a pretty good storyline. Uh, Kind of up and down. Again, we got the resolution of the Astra storyline, which was something that was lingering on indefinitely. I think, when did his solo show get canceled? Was it 2010? I don't know, 2012 maybe, something like that. And we went on for a good 4 or 5 seasons with Constantine guest starring, but never resolving that plot line. Well, we got that plot line resolved where Astra has grown up. She's not a little 9-year-old girl anymore, and she is running hell, or, well, not running it, but let's say she's got her slice of the pie down there as a all grown up Astra. Kind of a bizarre storyline, really. I'm not fond of when they do hell and demons and angels and fallen angels and this and that. So Constantine's not really my cup of tea. I am just a fan of Matt Ryan as the character. I'm really, I'm really into what he brings to this show as a character and as an actor. But the character of Constantine really meshes well, and I think everybody felt that he would on this series. Of course, unfortunately, there was a lot of other characters that we still don't know. They're left in the lurch. His co-stars from his, unfortunately failed series, and they could always be brought in eventually. One of the things I was majorly disappointed in, of course, is the love interests this season. We had once again the highs and lows, the ups and downs of the Ava and Sarah romance, which was pretty annoying. Before I get straight into that, though, Constantine had another bisexual romance, which, of course, is as uncommon in the CW verse as Lucy eating chocolates in the chocolate factory. But again, the problem I have is I would love to see Sarah and John get together. Sarah and Constantine, I think, have great chemistry. The few tiny scenes that they have together have more chemistry than the whole season with Sarah and Ava. And it's just the truth. And I challenge anybody to deny it. I have nothing against the actress that plays Ava. I think she should continue on as sort of the Time Bureau figurehead. But quite honestly, I don't know. I don't see any heat between them two, to be totally honest with you. It's like rooting for Laverne and Shirley to get together. I mean, I just don't see it. I don't see why they keep pushing that ship. When they broke up earlier in the season, I said, okay, we have a chance here at a real mature relationship that they could show what it's like to still be coworkers with a failed relationship, and that both parties move on and life goes on. No, they had to get back together. And again, I mean, the only other relationship I think that, well, maybe a LGBTQ plus relationship that failed in these shows was probably because Maggie Sawyer was written out, right? So I don't know. Maybe they are just desperate to have a lesbian relationship succeed. But as I said, Sarah is bi, John is bi. There's no real excuse for ignoring their great chemistry just because, well, we have to stick John with a man, we have to stick Sarah with a woman. I think that's pretty much where they're headed with those characters. And I think it's just wrong. You have to go with what works, not what you want to see happen for the sake of, I don't know, representation, SJW politics, and whatever. That we want to have as many lesbian relationships take precedent. Let's look at some of the other characters here. I think Mick Rory got the shaft this season. He was terrible this season. Um, I don't want to go so far as to say they castrated him, but he really is supposed to be the obnoxious uncle of the team. He's supposed to be sort of the hothead, the alpha male. He didn't really show any of those characteristics for the most part this season. They played up more of his dime store novel writing, which again wasn't really the most fascinating aspect of him. I mean, it was cool for a joke, don't get me wrong, but I think they returned to that like no less than 3 times this season, 3 or 4 times, which was probably 3 times too much. Uh, I don't know. The one having it as a one joke thing was fine. I don't think they really needed to go back to it. But again, he was really had nothing to do, and he's really one of the funniest characters in the show, and he's allowed to be. And he was wasted here. The character of Charlie returning, Maisie Richardson Sellers, I believe. Uh, they got her back on the show, which is fine. She's a good actress and an attractive woman. But again, the character of Charlie was not really all that great. I felt like they strained to find something to do for her as well. Again, I don't know. It just felt like a waste of a character. I mean, they honestly could have got somebody else in the role. And also, the fact that she's a shapeshifter also kind of made it that they wrote themselves into a corner several times. Let's see what else. We've got the relationship between Nate and Zari this season, which I wasn't totally against. This is one of the, I don't want to say pluses, but I think it worked. Of course, Nate was not heavily involved in the first half of the season. Nick Zano, I believe, had some issues with his child. I think his son was having health issues, and he sort of took a back seat, which was understandable. I really like Nate in the story in the show. I think he's one of the MVPs that I don't think we want to lose. And as far as Zarya is concerned, as far as Isis, which she's never really referred to anymore, she really is a very expendable character. And I think this was a step in the right direction to show a little bit more of what she could bring to the team. I kind of hesitate to say that because I don't want to feel like her only interesting attribute is now that she is, you know, Citizen Steel's side piece. But I thought it was an interestingly developed relationship. They didn't just go gung ho in and try to pretend like, see, you should have seen these guys belong together. No, it was very patiently done. It was kind of juvenile, I think, the sort of, do you like me checkbox uh, Y or something type stuff. But still, it did feel like it kind of worked. And also on this side with Nate was a big part of the season was with his father, which is the Biff actor from Back to the Future. I'm not a big Back to the Future guy. Of course, I like the movies. I've seen them all, and I've seen them all several times. I'm not really a huge fan of it, so it probably didn't mean as much to me. But of course, he was a fun character to see come in, and I think the relationship between he and Nate was handled very well. Um, Kind of seeing the sort of teen angst re-emerging in Nate over his relationship with his father. Again, this is something that kind of had to be done because Nate had to be in less scenes, and so they stuck him with his father and at the Time Bureau. All right, let's look at that was one of the more positive aspects, I think, of the season. Before we get to the overall storyline, let me just we'll talk also about the Atom and his relationship evolving there with Nora. I thought that was really good. It's interesting because I don't think that Brandon Routh has gotten too much to do in the past couple of seasons, and I feel like they tried to let him stretch his wings a little bit here. And he also got to play the villain inhabiting his body. Again, I haven't put down copious notes about this, so I can't remember the name of that villain for this season. But and we got to see Brandon sort of stretch his wings a little bit and get to do some cool stuff. Again, I really like the relationship with Nora. I'm glad they had an episode where they kind of sort of made it look like she was going to return to her roots as sort of a black-hatted villain, but she again was allowed to rise above that, which I was very proud of the fact that they let her do that. So again, that was sort of a plus. Again, they didn't give Ray a whole lot to do this season, and again, a lot of it has to do with, I think, the sci-fi elements. They are not doing too many of them. There are not too many superhero elements. We see right here in this image I've got up of Isis in what is, I guess, allegedly her costume, but she wears it. I don't even think she wears it in this season. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But so again, that was kind of nice that they kind of gave him a little bit more to do. And I liked that Nora did stay on the side of the Angels. All right, so the overall storyline this season was terrible. It was lacking severely. They tried to play up the fantasy fairy tale type thing. Didn't work. And I think what the problem was is I think success went to their head in a way where they thought they could do no wrong, the showrunners, because it really wasn't all that interesting. And we have because they allowed themselves to believe that the goofy quirkiness of the show will, keep them afloat no matter what. And I think they leaned on that quirky cuteness a little too much this season. I think the show no longer resembles a DC Comics show. It more resembles now, I mean, the original conception was let's take a lot of the C and D listers from DC Comics. Plus, we'll take some of the characters that we were introduced on other shows that could probably get a chance to flourish here. And we've done it. And here, this season, we've proven that there really is no tie to DC Comics with this anymore. The Atom barely uses his suit. Nate barely ever armors up, which I can only imagine is a cheap CGI effect. If we can do the Flash running every episode, I'm sure we can get Nate armored up. Charlie's brought in, not even an actual character. I guess you could say ditto Nora. As I said, Mick has a very unexpensive power set, but he does nothing. Ditto Zari. And it just doesn't feel anymore like they're doing a superhero show. It just feels like they're doing a kooky comedy where one or two of the characters might resemble something from the DC comics. And I think that has to change for next season. I don't think we can get away with this again. Um, Unicorns, fairy godmothers. Um, we had a new character, which was I don't want to say so lame that I forget her name, but again, we had that lame character who became a werewolf, the female Asian character who became a werewolf. Again, nothing against the actress, nothing against them trying to do something out of the box, but it failed miserably. She really didn't need to be in this season. And ditto Gary. Gary is sort of the low rent, Howie Mandel. Really, he really doesn't need as much as they gave him here. They tried to also make him sort of a big part of the finale. Again, he's okay for one or two episodes if you want to do a comic relief thing, but he really doesn't hold up to repeat entries into the stories. So again, they could have eliminated those two characters, and really we would have been none the worse. There was a very strange ending to this one where they sang a song, sing a song, and I don't know. The ghost of Nate's father sort of helps bring him back from death. Again, very. It's not very comic booky. Oh, and we also had. I just have to point this out. We had the Richard Nixon episode where they're all swallowing a bug, which was the first time, as bad as all, and I think I probably put it last, Legends of Tomorrow this season on my list for this episode alone. This was the single worst episode I think I've sat through from a CW series, bar none. I mean, I suffered through some of the worst of Smallville, and I didn't feel as embarrassed as I felt with that one episode where they were swallowing the fly, and Richard Nixon was played for laughs as he always is. We can never treat Nixon with any monogram of respect, but it just felt like this season they really need to go, as Norman Osborn would say, back to formula, because everybody knows that the first season was a little top heavy, a little earnest in trying to get the DC stuff. And we also got Vandal Savage back for a quick joke, which is all this show can do now. If they're not dramatizing the LGBTQ relationships that are crumbling and reemerging, they really have no drama, no gravitas to any of these characters or shows. Episodes. And it's when it was with Vandal Savage, it felt like there was a threat, and they even made him a laugh. They even emasculated him, and it just feels like I think the second season was the best when we had Malcolm Merlin, Damien Dark, and Eobard Thawne, the actual Eobard Thawne. We'll get back to that in a moment, but and they were going after a relic that was worthy of them, which was the Holy Grail. I mean, not the Holy Grail, which was the Holy Lance. And it felt like there was, earth-shaking ramifications, and we could run into other characters like, Jonah Hex, and I don't remember. There was other things that was interesting in the first couple seasons. We saw the post-apocalyptic future, which they're going to get into again on Arrow. We're going to talk about that in a moment. but it just doesn't feel like we're doing any grand adventures. There's no grand villains. I mean, we got the spooky stuff for the past 2 seasons because we've dealt with Constantine. I think we need to move beyond that now and just get back to some of these world conquering villains. Bring in Mongol. Bring in, I don't know, the Eradicator or something. I don't know, but it's just not working here, and I can see that the writing is on the wall for this show. Where I don't know if any of these, and I already did a video about this, but all the CW shows are on their last leg, and particularly after Crisis, we're gonna see a lot of changes in the lineup. All right, so that's all we've got to say about Legends of Tomorrow. Please do better next season. Do better, Legends, because you were my favorite show for quite a while, and the show still has moments of brilliance. Um, but again, it's like a raunchy comedy. I think maybe they're trying a little too hard to be Guardians. Um, and it's just not working for me, at least. All right, so number 9, we have Legends of Tomorrow. Let's see, number 8. We're still in the I feel so embarrassed for you, or maybe more embarrassed for myself that I watched y'all season. But yeah, Supergirl. Yeah, Supergirl didn't make it to the worst spot, and I was kind of fearing that she would. But there was some good things near the end of the season that pulled her out of the last place showing. Unfortunately, the first half of the season was still terrible, and most of the last half was a mess, even though there was some great stuff in it. Again, as everybody knows, I love Melissa Benoist has done a great job with this character. She deserves a better show. And I guess the same could be said of Legends. I mean, Katie Lotz, Brandon Routh, Nick Zano, they're all great. But it's the writers that are failing them, and I don't know why. I don't know why they have to have these SJW writers that are really screwing the show up. All right, so let's take a look at some of the things that are happening this season. Um, Again, Supergirl has always been the feminist show. They've tried to make it SJW from the beginning by the feminist leanings that they did with Cat Grant. Um, Ever since it moved to the CW, it's taken a very SJW slant on LGBTQ issues, which have been very heavy-handed. Um, we'll just get to that right now with Dreamer. Nicole Maines joining the cast as Dreamer, a obscure hero, I believe, from Legion of Superheroes, which was, I believe, gender changed and all kinds of things that it changed. It didn't really resemble the original comic character, I don't believe. But so yeah, I don't know that they leaned quite as hard on the SJW trappings with Dreamer as I thought they would. I thought it was going to be a coming out affair, as it was with Alex, where every episode had to deal with her coming out. And to their credit, they didn't really do that. She came out, I think, to Jimmy and to Kara that she was transgender. But apart from that, there was only one instance that I believe was very heavy-handed, which was the episode where they tried to give her an origin or explain her powers or how it happens that people from her planet or whatever, the females are born with the power to interpret dreams or predict things from dreams. And because, of course, Dreamer was born male, there was the obvious question being, well, how could you inherit this power if you were born male and it only is given to females? Which, again, was heavy-handed, but it's a question that they went out of their way not to answer, because I guess it's pretty uncomfortable to have to point out this fact that yes, she really isn't female, at least by birth, at least biologically. So again, it wasn't in every episode. It wasn't as heavy-handed as I thought it was going to be. But again, this is like not the kind of stuff that you really need in your superhero shows. as I said before, I'm hoping that with the introduction of the Batwoman series coming out at the end of this year, I guess, we'll be able to address topics like this maybe in a forum that it's more applicable to. Because I don't think, and that's kind of my stance on this, which might be unpopular, particularly with the LGBTQ community, but I don't think in a comic book show and a superhero show, these kind of questions are appropriate. I think you have to have kids watch these shows. You have to make these shows for kids first and foremost. People don't like that, and I'm very strongly against R-rated superhero shows. I mean, you have the odd one. I mean, I'm sure Joker with Joaquin Phoenix will probably hit its intended demographic, but for the most part, I think these shows should not be sensationalized to the point of, well, we have to herald the first transgendered superhero. We have to, herald each and every lesbian, bisexual romance, and so forth. And that's one of the reasons why I object to Dreamer and her whole story arc on the show. But as I said, in fairness, it could have been much worse. She really didn't have much to do by the end of the season. And unfortunately, for me at least, it doesn't look like they showed her the door. So she's apparently going to be back next season for, again, what might be the last season of Supergirl next season. Let's talk a little bit about Brainiac 5, because they tried to get a relationship going there, which with the Dreamer, which again I found very perplexing. Brainiac 5 is I don't know, a Kaluan, which I suppose, again, I've never really understood what a Kaluan was. They're part robot or something. I honestly don't understand. And you could tell me in the comments below where I'm getting it wrong, because after the Byrne revamp, he looked like just a robot with maybe an organic brain at the top of it. But from what I remember as a kid, it was basically a guy in a pink jumpsuit that was green. And so I don't really understand the biologics of the Kaluans. Brainiac 5, of course, was always romantically linked with Supergirl. And again, because they went with the beefcake of Mon-El, they're not probably going to explore any possible relationship between Brainiac 5 and Supergirl. Again, I don't know. There really isn't much to say about him this season. They try to do something interesting with him where he was sort of rebooted to his cold and calculating ancestral setting or something, but that lasted very briefly and went nowhere, and probably for the best, because I don't think we really needed that. His performance, the actor's performance, which, forgive me, I'm forgetting his name, but it was very erratic this season as well. And I like him, so this is not really a jab at the actor, but he dialed it up to 11 for like 2 or 3 episodes, and then went back down to being very subtle, which I think Brainiac 5 should be more subtle. And I think that maybe they keyed him up a little too much this season and tried to make him seem a little too, I don't know, a little too jittery. On the other side of the screen there, we got David Harewood and his role as John Jones, which of course has always been fun. They gave him sort of a thankless role this season where he's trying to be a pacifist, but they are trying to broach the fact that in the comics, John Jones is a detective, a private eye. And so they kind of tried to do something with that. But the storyline of him being a pacifist was very strange. He had some, they did involve Carl Lumbly, who, of course, is the voice of the original Justice League version of Martian Manhunter, which is always fun to see him. But they brought him back after his death last season to sort of guide Jean during this sort of path he was on, that was trying to walk in his father's footsteps, where his father kind of said, "Look, you really can't walk my path. You have to walk your own." And so now allegedly we're going to see the birth of the Manhunter, which I don't know, we really didn't get a whole lot of him this season, and I don't know if that's purposeful. They didn't do the CGI for the Manhunter too often this season. Again, it was kind of boring. So far, the subjects we've tackled here is that the season was just boring. I think that was the worst part. Also, regarding Jimmy Olsen and Lena Luthor continuing their quasi romance, it sort of just is dropped. We got drag racers in the background again. It's a Saturday night. You're going to hear drag racing. But Jimmy Olsen and the Lena relationship pretty much went nowhere until finally she sort of just nudged him out of the relationship. It was a very odd and peculiar and low key way to get him out of a relationship with her. I didn't particularly understand it. It's sort of I don't know. It's sort of that she's like playing her cards close to the vest, and she didn't really think they saw eye to eye, and she kind of just dumped him. And we really didn't get him back as Guardian, which I said that was always the most interesting thing they've done with Jimmy Olsen in this series, was make him Guardian, because he flat out stinks doing everything else. They gave him a near death experience, which really didn't help the character. And we introduced Jimmy's sister, which again, she's a therapist or something, and Jimmy is given PTSD, and again, just write out this character, write out Jimmy Olsen. I have nothing against the actor, but it was a mistake from the beginning, the conception of this character, to be totally honest with you. And they are reinventing him every season because they don't know what to do with him, and what they're doing with him doesn't work. The first season, he was sort of the, he was the object of Kara's affection. He was the desired boyfriend that was unattainable. And then when there was a chance to attain him, they realized there's no chemistry there. Let's back out, and they ended it pretty quickly. In the second season, he was Guardian, which for some reason didn't go over well with fans, even though I thought it was probably the most constructive thing you can do with him. Third season, he was the boss of the planet, and sort of showing his chops. And then the fourth season, he's sort of just like a whipped boyfriend, and there really was nothing else they could do with him. They just sort of, again, kind of emasculated him, and he was just sort of this whimpering PTSD survivor, which was pretty sad. Okay, so then of course Alex Danvers, that was pretty pathetic as well. They didn't have anything to do with her really, because the only things they can do with her is prove that she's a lesbian. Again, it's a problem common to all the CW shows, and I think in this case it was more a Lifetime television script. It felt like, where they were trying to focus on, well, the reason for the breakup with Maggie Sawyer was that Maggie didn't want kids, and so she was going to have kids whether Maggie wanted them or not. And so now, unlike what was expected last season, where they were saying, well, maybe she'll adopt Ruby or something, what they're actually doing is they're going to try to let her adopt a baby. And now, of course, she's going to fall in love with Jimmy's sister, who just happens to be a lesbian. Can you believe that? On the CW, where basically 1 out of every 3 people that you'll introduce on the show is a lesbian or gay. Again, it is just so woke, these shows. And again, I don't mind one show being woke, and then maybe you can do some cross pollination, have Batwoman appear on Supergirl or something like that, and you'll have some of the storylines. But again, this is just the most painful SJW wokeness being forced in these shows. And so now we've got another Lifetime drama playing on in a subplot, where there are just way too many subplots, none of them interesting. Again, how many have we named already? Jimmy and Lena, Martian Manhunter, Dreamer and Brainiac 5, Alex wanting to adopt, Alex and Jimmy's sister. None of these were really any interesting. Now let's move on to the villains. And the villains were woefully uninteresting this season. We had Agent Liberty as sort of our hate mob ruler, a guy that must have voted for Trump and put a Trump sign in his front yard, and him and all his hillbilly friends sort of hate them roaches, which is what they unaffectionately call aliens. Very heavy-handed message this season. And again, woke points, they were scoring left and right, up the wazoo, and out again. And again, there was nothing very interesting about it. They tried to build up Agent Liberty. Sam Witwer, by the way, terribly wasted in this role. They tried to build up Agent Liberty as a man who, as seeing the progression of a bigot, basically the progression of a guy that live and let live. Then he sees, some corporate shenanigans where, you know, his company is having problems, his father's having problems, and then he starts seeing his father's point of view, which is a bigoted one. And as the series progresses, we see how he builds up the resentment towards aliens, how this becomes damaging and deadly at the end of it. His wife ends up dying. So again, it's sort of trying to build up a Magneto style villain, for lack of a better term, and it just fails miserably. He is an afterthought at the end of the season, and I don't know if that's because they realized he was so weakly written, or the fact that there wasn't much of a character there to begin with. They're basically just trying to do their version of a Trump supporter who probably was well intentioned at one point, but then just got more and more of a fanatic or something. And so that was a very disappointing waste of time, particularly when the character is wasted at the end. They built him up to be something important, which pretty much went nowhere. Also, for villains, we had Manchester Black. Manchester Black, of course, was not black in the comics, but he was here. He was sort of played by the sort of like the equivalent of I'm gonna forget the actor's name now, but the uh oh, I'm gonna forget his name, but the guy from Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was sort of like, yeah, he was. I know I can remember his name, and I'm gonna remember it right after I do this video. But Tim Curry, that's it. Okay, I struggled through that one embarrassingly, but he was sort of like the Black Tim Curry, and he was amusing. I liked him in the limited amount that they did. They tried to use him as a dark opposite of the already dark Agent Liberty, where he was sort of happy with his girlfriend and live and let live as well until his girlfriend is killed by humans and he has a grudge against them. He had a pretty nice rivalry with Martian Manhunter for a while there because, I was happy about that because it gave Jean something to do apart from just sort of, you know, hold the flowers and the love beads where he's trying to be a pacifist. But again, it didn't really go very far, and I believe he was killed off. I don't even remember. And then Bruce Boxleiter, who took over for Brent Spiner, who probably read the script for the season and realized, I think I'll be all right. I'm going to pass on this. And so we went from Data to Tron, and Bruce got the thankless role as the shifty president that took over for President Marsden, aka Linda Carter, because she had to step down because she was an alien. And again, very woke. You could tell it was sort of like, who says that these shows aren't wish fulfillment? Because basically, we had Kara as a reporter in The Power of the Press taking down a corrupt president, a corrupt sitting president, and having him exiled from office. Again, it's woke wish fulfillment this whole season. And unfortunately, it was terrible. That's why it gets eighth place in the list. But I do have to point out the good things here. Now, we have to talk about John Cryer as Lex Luthor. He was fantastic. I would say he was probably my second favorite Luthor. That's tough. But after Gene Hackman, he's a good contender for number two. I don't know. The actor from Superboy, I think, is underrated, and we also have Michael Rosenbaum. So it's very close because I think those are all pretty close. And then got Clancy Brown, of course. But I would probably put John Cryer in second place, in that coveted second place after Hackman, because there's a lot of great Luthor actors, some not so great, but he really did pretty well with this role. And the sort of cat and mouse he does with Lena in the season is worth watching. Um, I this is the problem. The whole season is very boring, but for 4 episodes. And I don't have the list in front of me, but I would point you out to 4 episodes. Stream them together. String them together as like a movie, and just watch like 4 episodes together, and you'd have like a long movie that is probably worth your time, and while skipping most of the rest of the season. They very wisely paired him with Miss Tessmacher. Miss Tessmacher. We even got him saying that. And Otis. Although Otis was treated very strangely, he became a Metallo and ends up dying and then coming back and then dying or something like that. But he was also very funny and effective this season. They also, I think, put in Mercy Graves as his sister, which I believe she also died. I'm not sure. And yeah, I mean, this was really what made it worth watching. I mean, John Cryer, of course, playing Lenny Luthor in Superman 4, and he really took, you know, great care of playing the character not as smarmy and slimy as he could have. It's still making him humorous and empathetic, though you knew that he was no good. I think that's kind of a quality that they have in Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. I don't think he was quite as comical as Hackman's Luthor, which I really like Hackman's Luthor the most, because of that maybe. But so anyway, yeah, major points for him, and hopefully Cryer comes back, and they'll actually have him face off Superman, which I believe this is the first season, not counting the first season where he was just basically a silhouette or a shadow, where Superman wasn't involved in the season proper. They did bring him in on Elseworlds, I understand, but they really didn't utilize him in this season as, sort of coming in and doing anything. All right, let's talk about the final key. This was like the most important part, which was Melissa Benoist. As I said, she's fantastic as Supergirl, and I continue to watch the show almost exclusively for her. And she gets to play. She gets to show a range of character here with a secondary character, the Red Daughter, which is a takeoff, of course, on the Red Sun storyline. Which again, I don't remember what the character's name is. They just call her Red Daughter. I'm not sure, but she gets to play sort of not a black-hatted villain like she had with Crisis on Earth X Kara. This Red Daughter is sort of, she's just manipulated by Luthor, and of course, in a Russian, laboratory or something, they managed to sort of mold her to what they want her to be and use her. And she sort of believes the propaganda against America. Again, they're trying to score some political points here, but again, it's done very well. I don't have any problems with it. My biggest problem is the fact that they don't do enough with it. And I think it's all down to the fact that it would be too much of a workload on Benoist. And that's sad because it's the strongest element of the season, that and Cryer. But if they could have involved her a little bit more, and I think you can see that in the final battle. See, the battles, when we really get Kara, you know, mussied up or whatever, bruised up, like last season against Rain. Those are usually the best episodes when she's really out there getting her hands dirty and fighting. And we really didn't get too much of that this season. We got a little of it in that fight. And again, it really was something that should have existed much more this season instead of the lameness of Agent Liberty. You know, they could have done a lot more with the Red Daughter storyline. And of course, she doesn't necessarily go out as a villain, which was pretty nice. All right, so again, got to do better. My campaign all season, Supergirl, please punch a big robot. We got a little of that in Elseworlds. I think her episode was the worst, unfortunately, of that whole story arc. But we got a little of it, so I'm happy for that. But we got to do better, Supergirl. We got to do better next season. Let's put the wokeness away. No more woke points. No more trying to do the first this and the first that and appeal to this demographic and this demographic. How about this? Let's do a story about superheroes fighting supervillains because the bad guys are bad and the good guys want to stop them from being bad. How does that grab you? All right, so in eighth place, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully the show bounces back next season a lot more because Melissa Benoist especially deserves it. That is number 8 with Supergirl. Let's take a look at my notes. I'm going on longer than I intended to. I originally thought the show was going to be a half hour. Yeah, I'm dreaming. Let's see. Next up, we have Black Lightning. Black Lightning's back, number 7 of the shows I watched this year of the 2018-19 season. There's not a whole lot to talk about with this season. I liked it better than last season, I'd say. Again, another show that has more than its share of woke points, which there was a point in the show where I was kind of throwing up my hands and saying, I might just stop watching because there was some like real weird wokeness where they had an episode where Jennifer, the character on the right there, his younger daughter Jefferson, was threatened to be arrested because she put her hand on a white woman's car. And I said to myself, is this show taking place in 1953 Alabama? Because I don't think anybody would call the cops on a black woman putting her hand on a car, leaning against it, which you might say is, oh, excuse me, I have to leave or something. But and then there was the other subplot, which was Jefferson being fired from the school, and they had a white principal take his place, and basically we're supposed to believe that the white principal is bad because this high school is predominantly black and they need a black principal. And while I don't I don't think that should be an issue either way. If the guy can do his job, whatever he or she should do that job, whatever their race is. So again, it felt very heavy-handed for like 2 or 3 episodes where Jefferson is fighting to get a black principal in there, and I'm like, well, um, whatever happened to Martin Luther King's content of character being more important than color? Isn't that kind of what we're striving to do? So again, woke points. It brings this one down considerably. The first half of the season, I thought the storyline was also kind of odd, kind of on the nose, where we had like a sort of like a hillbilly feud between the Hatfields and the McCoys. The Hatfields being white, the McCoys being black, or vice versa. And they had a couple who was I remember, if I remember correctly, a white mother and a black father having twins where one was white and one was black. And while it was sort of heavy-handed, the feud went on, and it was kind of unnecessary because the children of both of these feuding families were of both races. Again, kind of strange. They brought out the character of Looker, which basically had nothing to do with the original Outsiders version of the character Looker. And again, that was kind of disappointing. That was a waste. Because I liked Looker and I liked the Outsiders, but here they play her as a villain and not at all like she was in the comics. So that was the stuff I didn't like. We also had some. Well, they also had. This was sort of the meh aspect of the show, which was we still had the Pod Kids going on, the storyline with the Pod Kids from last season, and it went on through like 3/4 of the season. So that was sort of meh. I was like, every time they showed up, it was very boring. And the highlight of the season, of course, was Khalil and Jennifer and how they were sort of runaways and young runaways in love. And that was kind of cool, although I don't recommend that you are a teenage runaway, so don't get me wrong, but that was kind of what carried the interest of most of the season. Khalil ends up getting killed brutally by Tobias Whale. And Jennifer starts her training in earnest because she was the one that didn't really want to be a superhero, remember? Anissa was the one that really wanted to be a superhero. And so, um, what's his name? The tailor guy. Yeah, he's sort of the white uncle. I can't remember his name right now, but he makes a suit. He's playing dead for some reason. I'm not sure. They have like a disagreement, Jefferson and him, because Jefferson because he didn't. The Taylor guy knew more about the history of Jefferson and Tobias than he let on. So by the end of the season, they made up, and Thunder and Lightning are now part of the team, part of Black Lightning's team. And the mother there, I can't remember her name either on the show. Again, this one did end for the season about 3 months ago, so don't blame me. I can't remember too much of it right now, but um, she sort of had her own heroics to do. Now, what puts this show up a little bit higher than some of the others is also the fact that they had a very strong finale, and you know, you can kind of end well, and some things will be forgiven. For instance, they had the pod children that grew up fighting Black Lightning, and Tobias Whale doing his thing, and he had a mercenary, um sort of a hot chick that was like doing his work for him, and she was an interesting character as well. Whenever she showed up, it was fun. I think they kind of suggested that maybe her and Tobias had something going on the side, but he ends up going to jail at the end of the season, Tobias. And again, I don't know how the next season is going to do. I think they have to definitely tone down some of the wokeness, because when this show is firing on all thrusters, when this show's firing on all cylinders, it is great, because I am a fan of sort of the family dynamic. We don't have enough of that. I think a lot of people look towards The Incredibles, but for me, for my money, the Fantastic Four is great with that family dynamic, and that's what I like about this show. If they play to that more and less to the SJW politics, and maybe give Jefferson a different big bad next season. Because much as I love Tobias and Kronos is great, he should take the kingpin role where they put him in jail and he's operating things from the jail. Maybe get him out by the end of the season and have him team up with whoever the other big bad is. But I think they need to shake things up. They need to be, again, go back to the formula of stopping a bank robbery, stopping a guy with a massive bomb or something, superhero versus supervillain. And they try to do some of it this season. I think I saw some improvement, but again, not really enough to put this one in the top 5. But there you have it. Black Lightning is number 7, so markedly improved. Again, another season that I'm not sure what it was last year, but we've got number 6, MacGyver. Yes, I'm still watching MacGyver, and I'm a big fan of the original show. This was season 3 of MacGyver, and I did like most of it. There are a lot of episodes that are forgettable in every season, but I think there was less this season. Again, I love the characters. Everybody loves, MacGyver and Bozer and Riley. We got George Eds, I believe is how you pronounce his name. His Jack Dalton is shown the door halfway through the season, which is disappointing, because I liked him as that character, sort of the devil may care fun character. Um, Not quite the Jack Dalton of the original, but he was an enjoyable character. And Eds didn't want to be on the show anymore, and so he is given a very tasteful exit, as he has his own undercover mission or something that he's going to be busy with for quite a while, or probably indefinitely if he doesn't want to come back for a guest appearance. And he's replaced with a woman named Desi, which is the woman here, the first to the left. And they're sort of suggesting that there's going to be a romance between them two. I don't think it seems that forced, but I don't really think it's a good idea, because Richard Dean Anderson, basically that was a rule of the 80s TV shows, which is you don't give the hero a leading lady, a recurring lady, or a girl of the week, but not a ongoing love interest. And I think you're asking for trouble if that happens here as well. But apart from that, the character is fine. I don't remember the actress's name, but she does well enough as a replacement. She's sort of a well, I don't want to say no nonsense, but obviously doesn't take any guff quite the same as Jack. We got we got what's the head of the department's name? I can't remember her name. But we get some stories about her husband, her estranged husband, who was gone undercover and has his own family now, which was kind of interesting. That was a touching storyline. And as far as Riley's concerned, it's interesting. She's going to take up with one of the Coltons this season. Again, I don't remember which one. I think I think it was the it was sort of like the Oscar and the Felix. Well, this is the Oscar. And she finds out on the QT that this Colton brother is two timing her, and so by the end of the season, she's out. And again, yeah, I mean, not a lot done with her this year, but I was happy that we didn't go back to her father for the big storyline for her this season. But there's probably going to be more with the Coltons and this storyline, I imagine, next season, which is probably going to be interesting. Bozer, of course, he's one of my favorite characters in the show as well. As far as the storylines are concerned, um, his hot girlfriend, I can't remember her name, is practically a ghost by the end of this season, which I was surprised at. I thought she was interesting enough on her own and that they could do something with her. I don't know if it's the actress's availability. I don't know if they just don't have enough spots for another character. I might have missed something. Maybe they wrote her out in a sort of put her on the bus moment where she's doing a mission or something. But again, yeah, he's one of the most fun characters, and it was good to see the relationship between he and Riley still. There was that episode where he's, a victim of the mad bomber, so to speak, which we'll talk about in a minute. That was the big season ender. But also, we had some stuff with Mac's father, which strangely he has cancer. It's kind of like the show doesn't want the season to end on a happy note for some reason. It seems like there's always something going on that makes it a downer. I don't know. But I think this is sort of the irony where MacGyver can fix anything with a piece of chewing gum, a couple of toothpicks, and maybe a roll of duct tape. But of course, he can't fix his father because cancer can't be fixed with those implements. But the actor is fine. The guy that plays MacGyver's dad, I always enjoy seeing him show up. We also have Murdoch returning this season, and we have the return of Michael Day Barr, who, of course, is the original Murdoch, but he's called Hellman in this one. Because I know on Twitter, Michael Day Barr is like, he's really happy to return to this role because he considers it a return to the original Murdoch. And in the first episode he was in, they did call him the original Murdoch, but they don't refer to him to Murdoch as Murdoch anymore because we've got the young Murdoch, so it's kind of disappointing. But we did get to see Murdoch Sr. going after Murdoch Jr., and it was a very well done story, at least better than the previous story with Murdoch. He doesn't get that much to do in these episodes. That's the only thing that kind of bugs me. But he kind of shows up in the last act to really do something. We don't really get enough of him, I don't think. But this is the first time. This episode marks the first time that Michael Day Barr's Murdoch is captured and put in prison. So at least he survives, and so does Murdoch Mark II. Again, for Lucas Till's part, he's still doing a great job. He gets to play the variety of emotions here and a lot of problems that they foist upon him. And he's still great. I originally saw him as Havoc playing MacGyver. Now I watch the X-Men films and I feel like it's Havoc played by MacGyver. So it's kind of interesting. And the season finale was very exciting with Peter Weller guest starring as I said, the Mad Bomber. who is trying to take out MacGyver Senior. He succeeds in killing Charlie, who I believe is a character in the original show, although he died. He's an old friend of MacGyver from the bomb squad days of the army, and he died in the original series, and they finally killed him off here because I kind of expected him to die as well. But again, sad moment there for Mac, as he's pretty much helpless to stop his friend from perishing before his eyes. And also, you got to remember an interesting thing that they had to do ending this season was also that Mac is now on the outs with his cancer-addled father, which again is another thing that I don't think. So while the show has made improvements over the past two seasons, I think it's not quite there. I kind of feel like there's still some things where it's contrived. Maddie, that's the name of the boss. And so yeah, it's doing better, and it's gonna be back for another season. I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna be happy. Hopefully they, like I said, will keep it on the upswing. And MacGyver is number 6. All right, we're now at the top 5, meaning that these were not bad. The others were sort of various degrees of not that interesting or disappointing. I would say MacGyver was slightly on the not as interesting scale, but not disappointing. And now, number 5, we've got the pretty good category, which is Cloak and Dagger. Yes, Cloak and Dagger has made marketed improvements over last season. I thought last season was horrible, quite frankly. I could not stand it. It was very unenjoyable. And this season, it still is way too earnest. It's as earnest as a broken leg. I mean, there really is nothing fun or funny about this show, but it did capture my attention. Very dark subject matter. We have the defrocked priest who's an alcoholic. We have Tyrone's mother who has captured the murderer of Ty's brother, her son, and she questions him and ultimately murders him. And Tandy is sort of going undercover to find uh, what's going on with women who are domestically abused. Come to find out, there is a sex trafficking ring where she is eventually abducted, nearly raped, in a very, you know, as gently as you can approach the topic. It was done, which I thought was very well done, considering. But again, these are heavy topics, and I think Cloak and Dagger can handle heavy topics, but in the comics they were always known for that, for sort of trying to take on real world issues. And so I don't really have as much of a problem, but it's difficult when you know what you're in for every week. It's going to be sort of like going to the dentist. You know what I mean? You never really know if it's going to hurt this week or maybe it was nothing. And that's kind of what it feels like here. There's some pretty tough subject matter, but they had a pretty interesting villain, which was Despair, which was a villain from the comics. I remember him in issues of Spider-Man, the Man Thing. There was different places where he popped up, where he was sort of a malignant spirit who preyed on the despair of others. In this case, it's sort of a mutant. I don't know if he's a mutant because they don't have that in this show, I suppose. But a Roxxon uh, explosion, or whatever, did this to him the way it did things to Tyrone and Tandy, and he gets migraines that are unbearable, and he's a trumpet player, so he doesn't need that. And the only way that he can uh, alleviate himself of the burden is to feed on the despair of others, which, of course, presses him in the sex trafficking job that he ends up undertaking. And he feeds on the despair of his victims. Again, it's kind of esoteric and far out there, where it's interesting, where he plays records, where in a record store or something, and all these records represent the pains that he has gathered from other people. And it's kind of off the wall and kind of strange, but it kind of works. I kind of found it interesting. This season is much more Tandy's, and I think maybe Ty gets a pretty good storyline at some point, but mostly Tandy is seeing visions of like what possible futures would be with Ty as a policeman, what would have happened if his brother wasn't killed. Again, it's interesting, but we don't really see them in costume until the end of the season, the season finale, where we get to see him. This is where this picture comes in, where Ty's actually in the cloak, which is something that's woefully needed. They are not using the cloak enough for a show called Cloak and Dagger. Of course, Dagger still uses her daggers. This, of course, is not a comic accurate costume, and being the stickler that I am, I would like her to wear the comic accurate costume. But let's face it, they're teenagers, and her having a slit down the front of her costume past her belly button is not going to fly. So it's understandable, but it's nice to see that they're giving them a little bit more of a costume at the end of this here, hoping that they will retain these costumes for the next season. Again, of course, should they get a next season, I don't suppose we know. Um, there's Officer O'Reilly that had the cliffhanger from last season. Again, it's done very well. It's done about as well as like The Enemy Within in Star Trek. The only thing that bugs me is that it seems that we don't have the split personality ever be a problem. There's always a coming to terms with a split personality. They did it in The Flash with Killer Frost. They did it in MCU with Hulk, where it's like, let's get these two personalities together and make them at peace. And there's never no fear anymore of the other personality coming out and dominating. There's no fear of what have I done in that other persona. It's just at a certain point, Riley says, okay, Malice, you got the chops for this. Or was it Mayhem? Yeah, Malice is the Fantastic Four, right? I think this is Mayhem. Either way, it's kind of the same principle. And it's just that she gives her body over to Mayhem and just lets her run free reign. Or at the very least, maybe they're both sharing the same uh, persona and just sort of having both sides influence. Again, it's not perfect and it's not particularly grand, but they have made improvements. So I am going to give Cloak and Dagger. Oh, also, before we move on, they did name drop Luke Cage. And there's a suggestion that maybe the Marvel Netflix shows will continue on in some fashion on maybe Hulu or something else because they have a bit of a following. So I would love to see a crossover between Luke Cage and Cloak and Dagger. That's the show really that can do it. I mean, that pairing could do it because this is, like I said, this show is earnest. It's earnest. They would fit in well on Netflix. All right, so yeah, an improvement for Cloak and Dagger, and I'm kind of looking forward to next season. I'll admit because I really didn't care about last season and didn't care about tuning in at all. But the hook of the what was going to happen with Riley and Mayhem or whatever was interesting enough to tune back in, and and I like these lead actors. I like Aubrey Holt and again I'm forgetting the Olivia Holt. See, I don't remember these guys' names, but again they're great actors and they really do carry the personas well. Their presence is felt whenever they're on screen. So again, Cloak and Dagger, number 5, and on the rise. Hopefully will do even better next season. Another show that unfortunately will not be returning next season, they will not be down for breakfast, is our number 4 show, The Gifted. I did not hear that the show was canceled until today when I was trying to look up some images and stuff to get the show on the countdown. In only its second season, it's canceled. Some are saying that it's probably because of the merger. We have the ending of Legion this season. So it's disappointing. It's disappointing to me because this show had so much promise. I don't think this season was perfect. It doesn't make it in the top 3, so it's still slightly flawed. But the issue is, I think they tried to go a little too real world here, almost the same way that they did on Supergirl. The only difference is they managed to sort of meter it a little bit. You know what I mean? They didn't go all in and try to feel like it was ripped from the headlines, but they did have the sort of you know, the Hannity slash O'Reilly television commentator that's sort of behind the scenes with the inner circle and trying to get, you know, one side of humanity pit against the other, mutants versus the humans and stuff. I thought that was a little on the nose, to be quite frank. But again, gonna miss this show. I think it had a lot more potential. I liked the fact that, you know, they seemed unafraid to match up with the X-Men movies and stuff. I mean, I could see very easily Polaris being the daughter of Magneto in this. They could have got either Fassbender or Ian McKellen, although I'm guessing, I don't know. I don't think Fassbender's old enough, and some would argue maybe the McKellen is too old. I don't know. But you could very easily see either of them playing in the show as her father. Again, Polaris, great character. I enjoyed John Proudstar as well. He was a lot of fun to see him in the show. The twins. That storyline again was it was building up to something. It was getting interesting. I don't think they were the most exciting part of the show, the family really, but and of course the father dies at the end of the season, which was going to, I suppose, open up maybe some storylines on what would happen. But we did get Andy back into the fold. He was on the bad side for quite a while, and thankfully, at least the show ended with him being on the good side. The drama between Marcos and Polaris also was a bit of a bring down. It was kind of hard to see him being whipped constantly and not allowed in his child's life. So that was getting old, but they did manage to make peace between them as well. Blink, of course, and her off again, on again, going on with the Morlocks and what was the you know, relationship going to be with her and John. Kind of was going back and forth. Oh, of course, we had the Frost sisters. Ooh, the Frost sisters, they were a lot of fun. So I would hope, and I've heard absolutely nothing on this front, but I would hope that they're going to try to get them onto another network. I would like to see the show continue. Again, the chances of it continuing are not that good, but if there's talk of the Netflix shows going elsewhere, which there seems to be, there could be a future for at least another season or two with this show. And again, I would have loved to see James Marsden return as Cyclops. It would have been fun to see what they could have done if they had been unfettered with a X-Men TV show. And this is the first, well, no, technically it's not the first, but this was sort of the best opportunity we had to get a live action X-Men show going here. So again, bidding a fond farewell, but they went out pretty strong. Like I said, I don't think it's as strong a season as the first season, but you know, it was fun. It was enjoyable, and I really hope it comes back. So number 4, The Gifted. All right, we're going into our top 3 now, and we're getting to the good stuff. Last season, most of the CW shows weren't that great. This season, they weren't as great either, but I think The Flash was a little bit better this season than last season. Um, it's not really a masterpiece, but I think they stepped in the right direction. I think last season's Flash was a bit of a bore, pretty much a downer. This season we had Nora Allen, or Nora West Allen, I suppose, coming from the future. It's Barry and Iris's daughter from the future, as the hero known as XS. And I thought she was an interesting character to an extent. I think, as is the case with the CW shows, the story went all over the place. The narrative really went haywire. And that's when they lost probably a lot of people, but kind of lost me in its enthusiasm, my enthusiasm for it. But they tried to get some things going with some rogues. We got King Shark back and Gorilla Grodd for a really good episode. Um, Again, the storyline had to do with Nora and her trying to go back in the past to save her father from that headline, and how she was really being manipulated, but She Didn't Know It by Eobard Thawne, and of course played by Harrison Wells' version by Tom Cavanaugh. And again, I'm going to repeat this like I always do. I think it's a mistake to put Tom Cavanaugh in the role of Eobard Thawne. It should really be the original actor. Again, I'm forgetting his name, but that's not the real face of Thawne. And I don't know where it benefits them to continually put Kavanaugh's face in the Thawne role. I mean, it's supposed to be sort of a jab that he was his mentor all this time and he didn't know, and this is sort of like a, spitting in his face by having this face. I don't think it really does anything. I think the other actor is better suited for the character. That's to say nothing against Tom Cavanaugh. When he is playing Thawne, he's doing really well. But you got to remember, he's not the original Thawne. The original Thawne is a lot more high strung. He gets to a level that Kavanaugh can't get to effectively. Kavanaugh is a purring villain, and that works out well with a lot of villains, but not Thawne. Thawne is a raver. You know what I mean? He sort of shrieks and rambles and who's the villain now, Flash? He has that cadence that he can get to, and I don't think Kavanaugh is as strong with that. So anyway, kind of disappointed that we didn't get the original Thawne actor back, but again, we got an interesting storyline, and I'm glad that Nara went back to where she was supposed to go, or faded out of existence until the Wests, or the Allen Wests, or the West Allens have her in the future. Um, Kind of a lopsided season for Cisco. He was back and forth. Carlos Valdez didn't seem to want to be doing any heavy lifting this season, leading to speculation that he was going to be written out of the show. They left the door wide open for him. They didn't leave it ajar. They left it wide open. And I'm guessing that that means next season is going to be the same as this season, where he's going to be in every other episode and not in every episode. And his storyline this season was that he wanted a cure because he didn't want to be Vibe anymore, which seems to be the polar opposite of what the character had been in the past. He wanted to sort of use his powers, and now he just doesn't want them. And there's a lot of shenanigans, a lot of tomfoolery about, well, sort of X-Men The Last Stand, whether the cure should be made as a weapon. Is it only going to be used if it's, you know, um, agreed to, accepted by the participant? A lot of weighty questions that really didn't need to be asked, in all honesty. Ralph Dibny, of course, is still a season regular. And I like him. I like the character. I think he's needed now more than ever, since apparently Cisco is not going to be as reliable a character as he's been in the past, and he goes sort of in and out. So I think we do need sort of another fledgling hero on the team, and I think he acquitted himself well this season. Killer Frost. What can I say about Killer Frost? They, like I said, they used that same principle of her, melding her powers with her own persona as Caitlyn. And so you really don't have Killer Frost. You really don't have another persona anymore. It just is a slightly edgier version of Caitlyn that comes out whenever need be. We got her storyline with her father, Icicle, I believe is his name, and her mother, and it was good. It was a respectable storyline, I guess, for her. We got to see her do some Iceman slides there. That was pretty fun. That was pretty cool. Grant Gustin got to do some pretty cool things, I would say. I mean, we got to see a bit of a different side of him with playing parental. He did feel a bit more mature. I mean, he's really grown since the show started. I think you can feel that a little more here. And sort of the back and forth with him and Iris, it felt a lot more natural now than it has in the past. Again, Iris as a character is sort of she's just there. I mean, she's really not needed beyond the fact that she's married to the protagonist, and they just struggle to try to really find something to do with her, and she becomes de facto leader when there really isn't much you can do with her. Joe West, of course, he was taken out with a back injury earlier in the season, so he didn't get a whole lot of. Jesse L. Martin had the back injury, not Joe West, but he was taken out of action for quite a while, and then shows up at the end of the season. Again, Cecile is using her powers fairly erratically. That's another character that's sort of they try to give her something to do, and it's not really necessary because not everybody needs a storyline all season, but they sort of gave her what I suppose Joe West would have gotten had Martin been able to continue on in the role all season. As for the villain, that is the biggest problem. I liked Cicada, the original Cicada, the male Cicada, because I liked the storyline we were getting, where he was sort of, and I dug his like WWE heel voice. That was great. I dug him being the villain where he was, you know, he was trying to protect his niece, whom he really wasn't good as a parent, but he found that in himself to be a good parent, and he didn't need to be an all-out villain. He could have been like, let's do something different. Let's redeem this villain. But no, he ends up getting killed, and I think he gets killed by his niece when she's older, if I remember correctly. And it goes off on a very bizarre trail where the grown-up niece who is in a coma comes out from the future and becomes the villain. And basically, the young niece has to be reached by Nora in order to take the cure and be back to normal. And so in the end, the niece is not allowed, to have a happy ending. Not she doesn't get the ending that Ruby was allowed when she went off with her mother when her mother was exorcised of her demons as Rain. Poor Gracie, her uncle is dead, and she goes off to foster care because she doesn't have anyone else. Because that's the reason why she went to her uncle in the first place, because her parents died and she didn't have anyone else. And again, it kind of puts a sad exclamation point on this season where it just feels like they meandered around so bad. If they would have just given us Cicada, the male Cicada, and the thing is, they didn't want to end it on what everybody figured it was going to be. That's what the bottom line is. It was everybody was figuring, oh, Barry's going to talk to him and say, look, I got a daughter, you got a niece, we love our kids, don't do anything bad, and let's just shake hands and go off on our merry way. But they didn't know how to do that without it looking predictable and boring. And unfortunately, they didn't make anything out of this storyline. They just kept throwing it from one extreme to the next, and they could have just probably ended it in half a dozen episodes, or maybe even a dozen episodes. Heck, they could have gone on to the 22nd episode or whatever it is. That's the season finale, and they could have just pulled out some other villain that would have sort of been a bigger threat. And I still push that we should have the rogues as villains on the show. Just get all of them. This marks the first season we didn't have Mark Hamill, which I don't think he was doing a lot this season. Since he probably has a small part in the Rise of Skywalker, I'm guessing. But again, anyway, so I don't think we had John Wesley Shipp either. Did we have him this season? I know we had him as Barry Allen, but I don't think we had him as a Jay. So that was kind of disappointing as well. So again, like I said, I liked the way the season started. I liked the male Cicada. I didn't like the way it kind of fell apart after they had the female Cicada in. I don't like the fact that there was not a happy ending, that they weren't allowed a happy ending where Ruby and her mom was. And apart from that, I didn't have too much of a problem with Nora, but I think they should leave her in the future or whatever. I don't think we necessarily have to have her come back all the time. And hopefully, they'll do more with Frost and Ralph, and maybe Carlos will have a change of heart and try to put his heart back into it this season. Again, I feel like we haven't talked a whole lot about Grant Gustin. Again, like Melissa Benoist, he's just great in this role, and I want to see him continue on, and hopefully he doesn't change his mind on playing the Flash the way Stephen Amell did. And so, with the Flash at number 3, we have, for our number 2 show, Arrow. Yes, Arrow made it up to number 2. Now, in fairness, I'm going to say this. Last season, I didn't count the number 1 show that is number 1 again this season for me. But I'm counting it this season, and Arrow really would be number 1. So I want to make that clear. Of the CW shows, Arrow had the most marked improvement. And this is the final full season of Arrow as Stephen Amell, which I wish he wouldn't have done it, but he's calling no mas. He's calling for no mas, and he is going to return for a final season of 10 episodes next season. It's unknown really what characters are going to return. I'm pretty sure we're going to have Diggle back, but Emily Bett Rickards has already pulled the plug saying no mas for a return of Felicity. And in the season finale, we see Felicity has gone to the great beyond. The Monitor takes her somewhere, and we're not aware, but apparently we're not going to see her again next season, even at the ending of Crisis. Which again, it already kind of hints that Oliver is not going to die at the end of this, which is what I think the pervading theory was. But Emily Bett Rickards, I believe, and I got into a Twitter war over this, so I'm going to say it again here and probably not get into a YouTube war, but I think it's the most ridiculous reason for her not to return for next season, because she's upset with the writers because she didn't want to play a mother. She was afraid that that would have been, I suppose, I don't know, it's just feminist crap, really. I mean, it wasn't a role she wanted to see Felicity in. She wanted to see Felicity more, I guess, as the head of her own company, and playing a mother or something was not. I just felt that it seemed very. It's a slap in the face to the fans that kind of wanted to see them live happily ever after as well. But she's not returning. Very disappointed in her for that. And apparently, the flash forwards, as opposed to the flashbacks we had in previous seasons, suggest that she will survive going on, and the baby that she and Oliver had will be born. And well, we do see the baby being born. I don't want to confuse the topic here, but Mia, which is the baby, goes on to be an important part of Star City's history, or future, I should say. I'm starting to get tired. This broadcast has gone on for over an hour now. So let me get straight to it. Disappointed that obviously Thea, Willa Holland, hasn't had anything to do in any of this. But we did get the return of Roy, who I always enjoyed in the show. And I'm glad to see that they brought him back. Again, the beginning of the season I was not very keen on because of the whole prison storyline. And I hate prison shows. I hate hospital shows. I hate courtroom dramas. I hate procedurals. And that was kind of getting into that kind of genre. And I'm still a stickler for just make it good guys fighting bad guys. We didn't get any of that for like the first half dozen episodes. We got into it heavily at the end of the season, which was cool. We also had sort of the back and forth over the team no longer being vigilantes, but being, fully fledged members of the law. Again, it was kind of touch and go because we had Dinah sort of, trying to pull rank on them, and they kind of had to go back and forth. And ultimately, which I think was one of the best episodes of the show, Dinah was actually really covering for them, and the team really stuck together. because we already had, I think, if it wasn't two, it was 3 seasons already of this team being dysfunctional, and this team not trusting each other, and this team Oliver not trusting them, and this team, it was just getting so absurd and it was so terrible. And I'm glad that they fully embraced that they were, deputized heroes of the law. That, it just didn't seem like they were getting anywhere. And I could see if Amel was getting tired with playing the character if it wasn't getting anywhere. Because how many times are we going to go back and forth on this? But they did stick the landing, and they're keeping, you know, uh, the Arrow, or Green Arrow, as I should call him, the hero. It was kind of a sticky wicket when we had Roy kill somebody, or two guys, I think, two guards, because of the bloodlust or whatever that he has from the Lazarus pit. That kind of threatened to throw a wrench into things, and we kind of got past it, but it could have been much worse, I suppose. As we see here, Bronze Tiger returns, Michael J. White, and it was fun to see him return. He turns to a good guy here. He's on the side of the Angels, and it was nice to see that a good guy, or I should say, a bad guy, could play a part as a good guy on the team. It's one thing to have Black Siren turn, as we had this long, sort of drawn out storyline with her, but Bronze Tiger, there was no guarantee that he was ever going to turn around and change his ways, so to speak, and he does here. His son is going to become the adoptive son of Diggle, apparently, in the future, Connor Hawk. And I think in the Legends version, when they did a futuristic storyline, it was that Connor Hawk was the changed name of the son of Diggle. But now they are using the same actor, and they're really admitting that he is Bronze Tiger's son. So we don't know who John Jr. is going to be in the future, in the flash forward, but apparently he's a big time player, a player, and Connor knows him. Very interesting the way they decided to do this, because Connor Hawk, of course, is supposed to be the son of Green Arrow, and now he's the son of Bronze Tiger. How the heck do we get that far afield? But again, let's look at how many Black Canaries we've gone through, and that sort of they've created that as a legacy title in the future, in the flash forward. We also had Dinah losing her Canary Cry, which I thought was pretty cheap, although they gave her the digital one, I guess. And Black Siren, of course, Earth 2, Laurel. She finally turns to the side of the Angels once again, as that also was touch and go. She sort of flirts with going back to her criminal ways. She goes on to Earth 2 again to sort of re-find herself, and then comes back as a hero. We had the guest appearance of Sarah Lance, Katie Lotz. That was a lot of fun. And again, I feel like this show is finally just finding its footing after the past couple of dismal seasons. I think I really think this is a good step up, and not a time to be pulling the plug. We did, like I said, that whole first arc of the season with the sort of the mousy meek serial killer. Like I said, that stuff wasn't that great, and I was preparing to hate this season. But when the second half of the season kicked in, it kicked in good, and I'm gonna miss Arrow, and hopefully next season's gonna be another good one. Uh, and let talk briefly also about Kat McNamara, I believe is her name as well. Again, I don't have anything written down, but playing Mia, she was excellent in the future scenes, the flash forwards, and we have grown up William. We have who, of course, is gay, because isn't everybody? But and we also have Dinah and Renee are still around in the future. Curtis is not, though. I never really cared for Curtis in the first place, so who knows what happened to him. And they never did get back to Ragman. um, but I never cared about him too much either. So there are places they could play with going into next season. There are places we can go, and seeing how it leads up to Elseworlds. Diggle got an interesting storyline where Ernie Hudson came in playing his father, or his stepfather, to be precise. And that's interesting because his stepfather's name is Stuart. And of course, this kind of is a not so subtle setup for Diggle to become John Stewart, the Green Lantern, which I don't have a problem with that because I feel like Ramsey's earned it. You know what I mean? I mean, some people would say, well, let Diggle be Diggle and let Stewart be Stewart and not try to, pull a fast one at the end of this series. But like I said, Ramsey's earned it. He's a good actor, and he's a good. Diggle's a good character that's never gotten a good storyline in his life, and I think this might be the first good storyline he's going to get if they actually do pull the trigger and give him either his own show or maybe make him sort of a legend or something. Whatever they're going to call Legends of Tomorrow. Even if that show goes down, they'll probably have some other show that's going to be an ensemble cast because they can't afford to do Green Lantern on TV. Not because they can't afford it, but because it's just going to be what they've done to Legends. They'll make Firestorm in it 3 times a season, and it's going to be disappointing. So it's probably for the best that they don't do that. So yeah, looking forward to next season. I hope it's going to be great. I miss, I miss the mask on Oliver though. Green Arrow is supposed to be a shadow stalker. I don't see him as being out there with his face right in front of everybody. Oh, yeah, let's talk about the villain too. We had Imiko, who was his sister by his father, and that whole storyline also kind of subverted my expectations because I also thought I didn't think that she was going to replace Oliver, but I thought it was going to be a place where we kind of had her join the team and then she'll go off with Roy or something at the end of it and just go away. But they did make her a fairly dark-hearted character that was going to try to kill her brother and basically anybody else that stood in her way. I didn't expect that from her, and in a way, it was refreshing because I'm glad they weren't afraid to just make her, you know, a dark-hearted villain. Although we've had so many, we've had so many of these Archer villains. I mean, a lot of people complain about the Flash having speedster villains, and you see how he really needed them because as a speedster, you really can't fight a character who's landlocked and earthbound. That's why they made Cicada jump with those amazing legs of his. Anyhow, yeah. So number 2, we have Arrow, and hopefully, I'm looking forward to what next season brings and leading up to the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which will probably, mark the end of his participation in the CW verse. But I do firmly believe that they can bring him back, particularly since they've shown he survived. They can bring him back for crossovers going forward. So looking forward to that. And hopefully we haven't seen the last of Amel. Okay, so and we haven't seen the last of Oliver Queen. And so the number 1 show, again, this is no surprise. Number 1 show this season that I saw that I was completely giving 5 stars to, Cobra Kai Season 2. I just recently did the video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time recapping the show because I've already done it. But I did feel the need to give this the number 1 slot. I really felt the need that I had to, even though we already reviewed it, even though we already have gone over it, we've got to give this show props. They have done a spectacular job taking an old franchise, bringing it back to its roots, as well as building on with the next generation. They've got a great cast of young characters for the next generation cast, a young cast, um, the characters, of Miguel and Sam, Robbie, Tori, of course, coming in this season. They've got a young cast that is very interesting to watch. Hawk, and then they know how to write them and make them interesting for you to want to see more of them. It's not a situation where we're in it only for the original cast, which that's the draw. But they found a way to make these characters interesting and the storyline compelling. And of course, the real draw is Johnny Lawrence, Daniel LaRusso, John Kreese, and they've done right by each and every character. We see Daniel struggle as he tries to, you know, make sense of his life in light of Mr. Miyagi's teaching now that he doesn't have him to go to try to fight karate with karate. Johnny Lawrence and his story arc, where he has come from a really bad place and made something of himself, and then Kreese shows up and things start getting out of hand, and he loses everything. And of course, John Kreese, still the villain of the piece. It's interesting because that's what makes Johnny Lawrence such an interesting character, because John Kreese is sort of giving into the darker impulses. Daniel is sort of the on the side of the light and the good. And Johnny Lawrence, though, is very interesting because he is in the middle. He's smack dab in the middle of this. I mean, Daniel, nobody is an angel all of the time and nobody's a devil all of the time. So Daniel has his moments in the series where he is, you know, not the most, not the greatest role model for the good guy. And at the same time, John Kreese isn't as dark and evil as you would think. He's sort of given Johnny purpose at a time when he really needed it as a kid. He's just, going off in his own, you know, sort of demented way. And Johnny is stuck in the middle of that there, where he could very easily be friends with Daniel, but then again, he still has the malignant influence of Kreese and a lifetime of being brought up in the Cobra Kai way of doing things. And again, I'm looking forward to next season. There's very much the talk of Elizabeth Shue coming back and reprising her role as Allie with an I. We still have some interesting storylines to do with the kids. That's not been resolved, of course. All those relationships, particularly, of course, what happened to Miguel at the end of the season. Want to see him bounce back, hopefully soon. And because the show, the Cobra Kai, it basically takes place, at least these two seasons took place within a day of each other. So it's, I hope we don't have Miguel sidelined for too long. Of course, they could do a time jump. And yeah, so again, without going too far into everything, it's just a spectacular show, and it's only improved since last season. So if you haven't seen the second season, by all means, get on that second season now. And yeah, I'm looking forward to season 3. I'm hoping maybe we can get Terry Silver, Bad Boy Mike Barnes. Who knows? Maybe even Chosen will show up someday. We don't know. But these guys that have put together this show, they have spun magic. They have spun gold, and I hope it lasts for a dozen seasons. I hope it gets a full 12 seasons, and I hope that you know uh, they should do it at its pace. You know what I mean? I would love to see like a 22 episode season, but that might not be right for the show. You don't want to water a show like this down, so maybe get more seasons in than episodes per season. That could be the way to do it. All right, so again, like I said, we'll wrap it up now, and we'll recap just for posterity the ranking of the 2018-2019 TV season as selected by me, your host. All right, number 9, we had Legends season 4, Legends of Tomorrow. What can I say? It that's what happens when you buy the hype and you just try to go too far in one direction. It doesn't feel like a superhero show anymore. Hopefully they get on the ball because they got a great cast and a really decent premise. Number 8, Supergirl season 4. Again, Melissa Benoist is fantastic. She did a great job with 2 different characters this season. Cut all the dead weight. Get rid of a lot of the side characters. Let Dreamer go off. Get rid of Jimmy. At this point, I wouldn't even mind losing Alex, but because they're not doing anything with her other than the generic tough girl role every so often, and focus on Melissa and give Jean Jones something to do. Other than this season where he was sort of on the down low, but they try to do a little something with him with Manchester Black, but try to give him a decent role next season too, and give us a strong villain this season, because we didn't have a strong villain except for a couple of episodes of Luthor. So bring Luthor back if you want, or do a another villain from the comics that is as strong. We don't need any more lightweights in Supergirl. All right, number 7, Black Lightning. Black Lightning, as I said before as well, stick to what the show's strength is. Not so woke. Give us another villain, another strong villain. You can bring Tobias back into it, but give us another strong villain. Show the strength of the family. That's what the bond is in Black Lightning, is seeing how the characters relate, love one another, and interact with one another. You got a good thing going if you just stay away from the wokeness. Number 6, MacGyver, season 3. Um, Again, I don't think they should force a romance with Desi. If something happens that makes sense, maybe they could go with it, but it all depends on how things work out going forward. Again, Bozer and his girlfriend, I don't know what happened there, but they should put them back together and maybe try to do something constructive with Riley. Bring back Murdoch, both Murdochs, uh, again early and often next season, and hopefully like another big bad like they had with Peter Weller. Number 5, Cloak and Dagger. Would it kill you to crack a smile? Crack a smile for once, crack a joke for once. They got on the bus and they were heading to, I don't know, New York or something. Maybe a change of scenery will also, you know, keep from going over old ground again. I was getting very tired of hearing about Tandy's father, her abusive father, and Ty's dead brother. That storyline is done. It's in the books. Going forward, just be superheroes and let's not go back to our old ways. Number 4, The Gifted. Again, there's nothing really to say since the show is canceled, but I hope they do find a home somewhere else if possible. Because, like I said, if the Netflix shows can survive, this is a show that really deserves at least one more season to potentially wrap things up. But it could go on indefinitely if it had the right people behind it. Number 3, The Flash season 5. Going forward, again, I don't know. I would just like to see more rogues. I want to see more villains. I want to see villain team ups. We got some of that this season, but not quite enough. Bring back Mirror Master. Give us a strong Mirror Master. Give us a strong Trickster. Um, bring Mark Hamill back. Do a family reunion because we got last season we got Prank and Trickster Junior. Give us Trickster, Trickster Junior, and Prank. That's the way to do it. And like I said, hopefully we can get John Wesley Shipp back to play the original Barry Allen and have him in for an arc, possibly fighting the original Trickster. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe that I don't know. That would probably be confusing for the audience, but that would be pretty fun. It would be to see those 3 actors back together again. Number 2, Arrow season 7. Yeah, and like I said, next season it's going to be a shorter season. Possibly they're going to spin off the flash forward characters, Mia and so on, to a series of their own. That might or might not work. I'm not sure, but I'm really hoping to see. Stephen Amell is great. I like to see him give his all in season 8, and hopefully we get to see some villains for him too. I mean, it would be great if they could bring back Deathstroke and finish off that storyline. um Deadshot, was he even brought back? I don't know. It could be interesting. I mean, was he killed off? I don't remember. It could be interesting to tie up some loose ends with his villains as well. And number 1, of course, Cobra Kai season 2. So there you have it. Those are the great shows and the not so great shows of the 2018-2019 television season. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. And we're going to do a live broadcast again next Saturday as usual. I'm hoping to get another one out before then, but if not, sometime early next week, we'll see you again next Saturday. So, until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.